Hello, I'm Dr. Stephen Andrew Missick, and I want to ask for your prayer and your support, if possible, for an upcoming trip, missionary trip, short-term mission trip to Mongolia. And what has happened is during the time of Genghis Khan, 1200s, before then actually, Christianity, the Aramaic form of Christianity, what used to be called the Nestorian Church of the East. Many people don't know this, but Christianity was widespread in the Mongolian Empire. In fact, we have the first record of missionaries in China saying that in the year 636, during the time of the Tang Dynasty, that a missionary, an Assyrian Christian missionary from the area around Baghdad, traveled along the Silk Road and made it all the way to China and stood before the Chinese emperor, to whom he explained the gospel, and the emperor pronounced his favor upon the gospel and encouraged the message of Jesus Christ to be spread throughout his empire with imperial favor. And he commanded that scriptures be translated into Chinese and that churches be built. And several years ago, well, almost 100 years ago, they found, hundreds of years ago actually, but they found several monuments and scrolls in the Turfan Oasis in Chinese Turkestan, I believe, what used to be called Chinese Turkestan. They found there's a cave and there's a lot of scrolls in there, and they call these scrolls the Jesus Sutras because they were translated, they're just gospel tracts basically, explaining the gospel in Chinese. They used to call the Assyrian Church of the East, which is a Aramaic church where they use Syriac, a dialect of Aramaic, very close to Aramaic, that was spoken by Jesus Christ. So yeah, it used to be called the Nestorian Church, now it's called the Assyrian Church of the East. And still to this day, there's a significant community of Assyrian Christians in northern Iraq, eastern Syria, western Turkey, and of course there's also a community in India and around the world. There's a large diaspora community in England and Chicago and Phoenix and California, Australia, and they still speak Aramaic to this day, a modern dialect. So during the time of Genghis Khan, many Mongolian tribes were Christian, and Marco Polo, he describes seeing what he calls Nestorian Christian churches almost everywhere he went throughout the Mongolian Empire. So what happened? Well, you still see a significant Christian influence in Mongolian culture today. Their alphabet is derived from the Syriac Aramaic alphabet introduced by Nestorian or Assyrian missionaries. But what had happened is a lot of things worked against them. Mostly there was a warlord named Tamerlane, and he's basically massacring Christians. Certain of the local Khans working on the Great Khan, some of them converted to Islam, like in the Golden Horde. So it looked like, many of these Mongolian rulers were Christians, but slowly some important governors converted to Islam, and then you had the Black Plague, and then you had Tamerlane and persecution. So the community dwindled. And in China, you had these Assyrian Christian communities, and they were basically, a lot of them were converted to Roman Catholicism. Catholic missionaries would come and start their conversion efforts with the local Christians, the local Assyrian Christians, and take over churches that were established by Assyrians. So what happened to the churches in Mongolia? It seems to have died away, but there's evidence that in the 1800s and 1900s, there's still scattered Mongolian tribes who are still Christian. They're cut off from the Assyrian Church of the East. They're just maintaining their ancient ancestral Christian traditions on their own. I read somewhere of somebody finding a Mongolian community, a Nestorian Christian Mongolian community in the 1950s, and I was trying to track information about that, and I couldn't. But somebody came across a Christian tribe of Mongols in the 50s. So what has happened recently is a few years ago, I have a friend in, someone I've known for several years, he's in China. And it's like, well, I want to go to China and I want to go see the ruins of the churches. They've restored one, it's like a museum. And I want to go to see the famous Sian Monument. And I'm going to do some stuff before I went over there. I can do some more research so I can see as much of the archaeological remains of this ancient Christian community. And it looked like we're going to do that, but then the Chinese government started, introducing restrictions on freedom of religion, and it was a hard time. But now I still have contacts in China, so it's very possible. So I was excited. I was on the border mission. I was making money. It's like, I'm going to go to China. Got somebody I know over there. I can go and film a documentary on the Assyrian Church in China. So didn't work out. I ended up going to Egypt instead. But my contacts in China still, and I could go and visit and do this work there. But the thing that's happened recently is there is a community of Christian Mongolians, like old Nestorian Christian Mongolians. And I've reached out to them, and I've been invited to go over there. Because in 1999, this is the Journal of Assyrian Academic Studies. And I have an article in here that I wrote. The Assyrian Church, the Mongolian Empire, is observed by world travelers in the late 13th and early 14th century. So there it is, page 85 to 102. And sadly, this is Robert Pellissian and some of his friends started this journal to encourage the study of the history of the Assyrian Church of the East, and put this information out there, to encourage research into it, preserve their history and culture. And half of the journal is written in Aramaic to encourage them to maintain the Aramaic language, which is facing challenges here in America, but also in their homeland. But unfortunately, they're not publishing this journal anymore. They had a website. All the articles were up. The website's not up anymore. So it's very disappointing. But I had 3 articles published in the Journal of Academic Studies, and I'm going to have them republished to make them available. I'm sorry the journal is not being published anymore, but we have to continue to advance the kingdom of God. And something I think is very important is looking at Christianity through a non-Eurocentric viewpoint. So Philip Jenkins wrote this book a few decades ago, I guess, called The Next Christendom. And he was saying that Christianity seems to be in a decline in Europe and America, but it's growing exponentially in India, in Africa. So you have this, and I guess Latin America too. You have this revival going on. So the center of Christianity is moving from the West and into the East and into the South. To me, something I thought was very fascinating, especially someone who's interested in missions, is I want to say that I think that overall the Western Christendom model has been good and it's done a lot of great things. I think God has used Western Christendom in mighty ways, and I think that the contributions of the Western Christendom should be honored and celebrated. But the gospel came from the Middle East, not from Western Europe. And it was kind of Europeanized or Westernized. It's a Middle Eastern religion. So something I found very fascinating is looking at African Christendom and looking at Asian Christendom. So you have Egypt took the gospel. You have the church in North Africa taking the church and the gospel through Sudan into Ethiopia. So you have the Coptic church tradition, and they've made important contributions. But until recently, if you're studying the story of the church, things are changing now. New books are being published, but church history has been presented as Western European church history, and the contributions of the Eastern Christians are marginalized or omitted altogether. That's changing now, but that's how it's been. And it tells the stories of these communities sometimes until the dawn of Islam, and they just act like they disappear when they haven't. And as the church spreads into, and grows in Africa and in India and the East, we need to look at these ancient forms of Christianity. I remember I was in Uganda. I was teaching these kids in Africa, and I started talking about the influence of Africa in the Bible, Africa in the early church, and these little boys and girls were just eating up. They're fascinated by that. The Christianity isn't a Western religion that's being imposed on them. It's something that's been in Africa for, like I said, some of the greatest Christian thinkers like Tertullian and Augustine and others were from North Africa. The Ethiopian church, it's very ancient. It's preserved a lot of important literature for us. But when you have the Assyrian Church of the East, you're looking at an Aramaic-speaking church, a church that's using the same language that Jesus spoke. Their scriptures are in the language that Jesus spoke, are in Aramaic. And this is a church that expanded all the way across the Silk Road into China, into Mongolia. For most of its history, sometimes you have more Christians in China and Mongolia than they had in the Middle East. And then the same thing is true with India. I was in India visiting these communities there, and I think they do use their own native language, Malayalam, in their services, but sometimes they have the Aramaic service. So here you have this ancient Eastern Aramaic-speaking community founded by St. Thomas in India, and these communities were there long before the European explorers arrived there. But we don't know this part of history. So what's happening now is I have this contact in Mongolia. They want me to come and give a lecture, which I guess they'll translate into Mongolian, about their history as Mongolian Christians going back to these the Kariat tribes. There's a story long ago, before the Mongolian Empire, through visions and miracles, these people were converted. These Mongolian nomads and clans and tribes became Christian. Like I said, Christianity was widespread throughout Mongolia until the decline of the Mongolian Empire. And there's evidence that certain communities survived to this day. So this person who I contacted, I don't know, it could be that this is one of the communities that survived until now, or it could be somebody who found out about it, and they're thinking, it's like, okay, this is happening in China too. You have a lot of Chinese people. It's like, well, we're Christian, but why should we belong to any, Western denomination? We've been Christians since Christianity has been here in China since year 636. Why should we be Lutheran Catholic? Why don't we just belong to original Chinese church, the Church of the East? And the same thing is going on in Mongolia right now. It's like, they're looking, it's like, well, you can see the influence of Christianity here. Our alphabet that we use is based on the Aramaic alphabet. Why are we using an Aramaic-based alphabet? Because the Christian missionaries came and helped establish our culture and our civilization, played an important role in that. And they want to go back. This could be a unique opportunity, and I don't think we should pass it up. If these people are interested in the gospel through their culture and rediscovering their cultural attachment to Christianity, and it could be an avenue for bringing Mongolia back to Christ, well, why wouldn't we explore it? So these people are contacting me. It's like, we as Mongolians, we want to learn about the church. Our ancestors were Christians, and some people, apparently isolated tribes, maintain Christianity. We want to reconnect with our Christian heritage. We want to be part of the Assyrian church again. We want to revive the Nestorian culture here in Mongolia. We want to get back to Christ. And why won't we go in there and support that? So what will happen? I need to raise the money. If this is God's will, the money will come in. I've traveled around the world. I got contacts over there. I can do this. I've done things like this before. Plus, they want me to come and give a lecture on this material I've researched over 20 years ago. But I think we shouldn't let this opportunity go by. Hopefully I'll be able to get the funding to do it. So how would it work out? Well, let's just say I get the money I need to go on this mission trip. The first thing I'm going to do is I'll let my friends and contacts in China know I'm coming. And I will visit the church and the museums and look at the Christian artifacts, get some video and photographs for documentary purposes. And then after spending a week or so in China, I'll go to Mongolia. I told these people I need somebody to pick me up at the airport, and I'll go to the church, I'll give a lecture. What will I do with that information? Of course, I'll record and document everything. And I know the patriarch of the Assyrian Church of the East. He's from Chicago, he's American. I've known him for several years, he knows me well. And I'll approach him and I'll say, I've talked to these Mongolians and they want to reconnect with their ancestors' church. They've returned to faith in Jesus Christ. They want to learn more. So you can do with it what you will. Do you want to allow these people back into your church? It's not their fault. They got separated. It's the decline of the tragedies, war, conflict, plague. If they want to come back to the church, it seems like they would be welcomed back. But all I can do is go there, meet the people, see what's going on, make some video. I'm a Christian filmmaker. I can edit it, put it out there, let people see here's what's going on. My father had this motto, and it was exalt Christ before all men, by all means, at all times. Exalt Christ. That's what we need to do. Jesus said, if I am lifted up on the earth, I will draw all men unto myself. Everybody. Africa needs the gospel, and India needs the gospel. I remember the first time I went to India, and the second time I was visiting, the Assyrian or Syrian and Indian Christians. The first time I was doing preaching in India, and it's like, man, this community is Christianity is the third largest religion in India. There's so much need here. There's so much we could do to help our brothers and sisters in Christ in India that we're not doing. And I'm willing to do it. We need to have more people out there doing it. So we need to exalt Christ before all men, all people, Africans, Indians, Chinese, Mongolians. How much more so when they're inviting you? Come. It reminds me of Paul. When Paul went to, he was in Europe, and he had a vision of a man saying, come to Macedonia and help us. So he went. So here we have, this isn't a dream or a vision, this is actually somebody calling out to me, Dr. Missick, come to Mongolia and help us. All we want you to do is come and speak to us. Why wouldn't I do it if I have the means? I'm an adventurer. I've traveled all over the world. Been to war twice. I'll do it. Exalt Christ before all men, because Jesus died for the whole world. By all means. By all means. That means like I'm doing Christian filmmaking, things like that. We need to use all means to communicate the gospel. And, if history or culture is a way, a means to convey the gospel, and people are receptive to that, why shouldn't we use it? Because you have this national awakening in Mongolia, right? Because they're looking, it's like, wow, our ancestors had the largest land empire of all time. And it's really an amazing thing. So here you have these Mongolians, and they're nomadic people, barbarians from our point of view. But many of them they're professing Christians. And my book talks about that. A lot of people came and saw that there were these Mongolian Christian communities. They're all over the place. Significant numbers of Mongolian Christians. Unfortunately, they declined and diminished. Apparently some are still there. So here you have the Mongolians thinking about, wow, look at Genghis Khan, this great man, what he accomplished, what our ancestors accomplished. And at that time, many of us were Christian. Maybe God will bless us and help us to become great. Maybe that's why God blessed us. Now, Genghis Khan was, he never professed Christianity, converted, but he was familiar with the gospel and had alliances with fellow Mongolian tribal leaders who happened to be Christian. So there's an interesting cultural renewal and renewing their former Christian culture. So if they have that interest or desire, why shouldn't we help them use that and to help them return to Christ? And at all times, why not do it now? That's the thing about it. Is like we need to take this opportunity now while the opportunity is there, right? There's a lot of things going on in the world, and it seems to me, God help this country. I hope that we have a resurrection of America. But America seems to be losing its impact and influence the world. We're a nation in decline. God help us. And China is on the ascendancy in a lot of ways. And I respect the Chinese culture. I'm not a fan of communism. But we're one body in Christ, and we need to be joined together as one, despite the different nationalities and countries and nations. All times now is the time to advance God's kingdom. So there's a call, there's a hunger, there's a thirst, and I'm willing to go there. And it's not anything complicated, right? I'm going over there, give a teaching that people want to hear, and I'm going to see what's going on and communicate it to the Church of the East and see if there can be a new connection there to revive the church in Mongolia. So this could be a historic opportunity, and I hope it's not missed. So if this is God's will, He'll make a way. So if you want to support, give for this 2-3 week trip, just go over there, meet my contacts, deliver a lecture, and come back, and then take the information, put it out there, and communicate to church leaders to see if we can make a connection to restore the church, the ancient church of the East in Mongolia once again. And also pray for me, pray for these believers over there. That should be our goal, right? Jesus says, "Go ye therefore into all the world and make disciples of all nations." So pray that you'd pray for me and support me in this endeavor. So thank you, and God bless you.